floated an idea, and I underline the word floated, an idea for scrutiny, for discussion, right? Mr. Agyarko hasn't signed any deal yet, irrespective of the fact that we all backed at the fact that the AMERI deal was overblown by about $150 million. So it appears as if any move to extend it and actually make it look like a better deal, it's of course not on at all. So we disagreed with those analysis. But that's because in the spirit of decorum and the spirit of democracy, Mr. Agyarko, I suspect, wanted this discussed, because otherwise he wouldn't have submitted the document to the presidency. And indeed, I suspect that the Attorney General at some point would have been involved anyway, because once the matter went to Parliament and the discussions were that some aspects of the bill had not been added, which is what Paul Adomochi was referring to, we can comfortably say that if the discussions had ensued and had been allowed, all these matters will come up in the public anyway. So I was actually grateful that there was even a suggestion of a discussion, so that not like a Kelly GVG that we never heard anything, was contracted in secret, and Cabinet didn't see it, and somehow it got passed. I'll come to that matter later, but I'm just trying to suggest that I suspect that Agyarko is not alone in this particular deal, and indeed, all the others who saw the innovation document and had the back and forth conversations must actually be answering questions as well, as some of your pundits in the studio have actually suggested as well. So for me, I think it's a big loss for the government. It's a big loss of President Nana personally. I know that because Agyarko is held at a very high esteem. Even persons very close to the president,
right,
have said that he is indeed held in high esteem.
Right.
So those would be my preliminary
your initial thoughts
around the sack. I think it's unfortunate.
I'll come to that point you made about the fact that it seems anyone who was involved in it should also be sacked and should also be sanctioned, if I can use that expression. And that's not really the question. It is curious about the issue of people who were involved, because here's a case where the finance minister, the attorney general were not consulted. This was taken to Parliament with executive approval. From a governance perspective, is that how things are done?
Well, presumably, the same questions can be asked of the persons who signed the executive approval, right? I mean, these are crack lawyers. As you know, the document that was presented, even if you spend an hour, you could have read a 13 or so page document. And that would have alerted anybody trying to convince the president that this is indeed something useful to go by and give executive approval. That we should wait a bit, especially when it's a multi-million-dollar deal, right? So look, yes, there were aspects of it that were sounds offensive, as in not getting the buy-in of the finance ministry and indeed the attorney general. As I maintain, I think that is the only contract signed under this administration that seemed to have checked those lists. But the point is that the executive approval, the executive approval must have come on the back of some convincing, which meant that 3 or 4 people actually agreed that this is the way to go. Fact of the matter is that nullifies whatever conversations or approvals that were supposed to have been sought for by the ministry, from the Ministry of Finance and Attorney General, because I would have suspected that those conversations would have been had by the person who actually signed this letter, the executive approval on behalf of the president. I don't think the executive secretary would have just taken the word of the of the energy ministry and then just suggest that because the energy ministry has told us that this is the deal, we wouldn't have to talk to the Attorney General. I think that would be very, very wrong.
All right.
And as I've maintained, I know you want to talk to other persons. I find this very, very, very unfortunate because one, the point has to be overwhelmingly made that look, Mr. Agyarko, in everything else, was making a suggestion of what should have happened, and he wanted a scrutiny of the deal.
Okay.
Unlike, let me land, because you see, I think it's a board that we need to expose these kinds of double standards.
I'm with the Executive Director of ASEP, Mr. Ben Boakye. Mr. Boakye, in the first place, you were opposed to this renegotiated AMERI deal, but was it really your expectation that it will end in the sacking of Mr. Boakye Agyarko?
No, I mean, we were opposed to the deal. We thought the renegotiation didn't go well. And, we have been tracking the accountability system, for this country as far as the energy sector is concerned. And what we wanted to see was that at the parliamentary level, once it became evident to civil society, to parliament, that we didn't get a good deal, we could stop it, and that is what we're hoping for. And when I got a confirmation that the presidency or the cabinet had decided that the agreement wouldn't go on, I thought that was a point of relief, for all of us. Because, we have seen a lot of these deals go through Parliament hurriedly under the speed of light, and if we had, had this kind of process where that accountability system would check, whether erroneously or deliberately, if we can see problems and one arm of government can't stop it, we would have a better country, and that's what we're hoping for, that once we all got to know that there were problems with the agreement, we needed to stop it, and that is what we were actually hoping for.
Well, in the spirit of there being a deterrent for carrying out deals like this, even though, like you said, it was not one arm of government checking the other, some will say this is a step in the right direction, deterring other ministers from bringing such deals to Parliament.
That would be difficult to say. I hope so. But what is important is that at every stage, we should see Parliament working. We should see the reason why there is that lengthy, accountability system where a minister writes a memo. The memo has to go to the cabinet. Cabinet approves it, and then it comes to Parliament, and Parliament also does its own scrutiny to approve it. It's to ensure that even if there's one error, be it from the minister's end, from cabinet's end, before it goes through that chain, we would have probably spotted whatever problems such an agreement would have, so that we can correct it as a country. And I think if we allow these accountability systems to work, it doesn't matter who is cooking what. It will be found out at what point. And I think that is what is important, for us to focus on getting the institutions to work, getting all the structures to be independent of each other, and do the right thing that serves the interest of the country.
Now, to this case specifically, Mr. Kujo on the other line believes that more heads must roll. This does not end with Mr. Boakye Agyarko. It's not even possible that it could have ended with him. Do you agree with that sentiment that possibly some other persons should also be sanctioned?
Well, I don't have enough data. What do we have is the memo that was sent to Parliament, and very little information that could help us do analysis. Where the president sits, if he gets the information and he thinks that ABCD person ought to go, I think for us, our interest is making sure that the deal doesn't happen. But if there are people who deliberately, wanted to deceive the system, then of course all of those people must be held accountable. But we don't have, the eyes to see who did what. What we are glad to see is that the agreement itself, which would have hurt the pockets of the ordinary person, is not going to happen. But the responsibility is on the president. He's the one we have elected, and he has to take the decision. If he thinks that he wants somebody else to do his job for him, that is his decision. But we always want to see that some of these deals go through a transparent process. We'll have the opportunity to critique it, and the right decisions will be taken based on all the discussions that will go on.
Perhaps an investigation then will be necessary to be able to establish those who were involved in this from the very beginning. And what exactly went on?
I mean, it will be a relevant call if the president is minded to let the public know what exactly went wrong. I mean, now we're hearing that the minister has lost his job. Is it the case that he was the only one who could have done this? I mean, those are questions that will probably need answers, So if there is an investigation, that could also help clarify some of the problems that, other people may contemplate, to have happened. And it wouldn't be a bad call for us to know exactly what happened, who actually negotiated the deal, because I'm not sure that the minister did the numbers. I'm not sure he on his own would have done the numbers to see what the rate should be. There would have been technical people. I mean, when it comes to power, people have to look at the efficiency of the plan. People will have to, advise the minister on the very fundamentals of the plans that he's negotiating on. So who gave the advice? Who actually gave him the information based on which he wrote his memo? Who even wrote the memo? I mean, if you have problems even with the memo, who did the writing? Who did the calculations? All these things will come out, and we know who is actually involved in all of these matters. So it wouldn't be out of place for us to have extra detail on how things went wrong, and that will also help, in exposing those who also give wrong advice, to the ministers.
In that case, looking at all these things that we have to uncover, I should say, should the president refer this case to the state security agency so that the investigation is thorough?
I mean, it depends on what evidence they have. Like I said, if they really want to probably do a preliminary investigation to see what could have gone wrong, if they believe that people deliberately deceive the minister or anybody along the chain, that becomes criminal, and that can also lead to further investigation by the police. But again, that information will be relevant for all of us to be guided, and all appointees to be guided, including the civil servants who are working in the ministries and departments, because they write reports, they advise the ministers, and it could go wrong. But if we have processes that check them also, then everybody is minded what advice they are giving a minister at what point.
Let me go to Mr. Franklin.